Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. Time for another show. Lots going on here today. Lots going on all around the world today. Plenty to catch up on, of course. I got one eye. You can kind of tell. I got one eye on the bus tracker app. I think everything's going to be okay. Today might otherwise be the first test of the emergency broadcast system for about 20 minutes as I drive my son to school. But I think it looks like the bus is dragging its heels, moving away from the stop. So they were probably waiting for everybody to run up to the bus. Okay, hopefully that's accurate and everybody makes it on time and there are no emergencies. There really is no backup plan for missing the bus. I imagine I would probably just say, bye, everybody, and I'll maybe turn on the broadcast again later. I guess I could play the music for a while. I don't know. All right. Well, at any rate, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be defending Ukraine on the ground today with our own AR-15s. We're not going to be, catching up on a lot of things from the ground today. All right. I don't know why I picked that one to be personally involved in. I have no idea. I think I was reading this morning about just again quickly and on Twitter. A January 6th defendant whose trial was beginning today, perhaps one of the Oath Keepers whose seditious conspiracy trial is actually beginning today, was, is this the one? No, just one of the straight up January 6th defendants, I'm not sure. Defendant Ryan Sulesky, who may or may not be an Oath Keeper. I don't know. I'm just seeing one of Ryan Riley's tweets go by very quickly. Noting here, this was an interesting passage here. DOJ says January 6th defendant Ryan Sulesky, who went AWOL from the Army for 7 years, by the way, just in case you were wondering what kind of guy he is, showed, quote, a penchant for violence when he posted a video of an assault rifle and a racially charged statement indicating his willingness to use it in 2020. He was a licensed firearms dealer. So, of course, I guess it makes a certain amount of sense that he would have such an assault rifle. I just thought it was interesting that he was indicating his willingness to use it, unless, of course, he decides to go AWOL for a couple of years and shirk his duty instead, which, is a possibility. It is, I don't want to say too much when a guy's on trial for something like this that would indicate that maybe he's, not that he's not capable, but not that he's not particularly willing to put himself in harm's way and actually, act out and do these things that he threatens to do all the time, except, well, apparently, during the 7 years that he went AWOL, he transported himself at some point to Syria, I think it was, to, allegedly to fight on the front lines there, not for the United States or anything under which, where he had an actual obligation to fight and bear those arms, but, wherever he felt like, which is, maybe not a guy that necessarily is going to show up to perpetrate violence, but the threat of it is quite enough. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And the rest of Ryan Riley's thread about this guy is maybe where I read all the rest of it. Sulesky attempted to paint his time there, and I think he means in Syria, as if it was a sanctioned U.S. mission in which he served with valor and bravery, rather than what it appears to be, an opportunity to act as a legal mercenary. I don't know how legal it really was. The excerpt from court pleadings, screenshotted here, says, let's see. More concerning is Sulesky's military history, for which he received a bad conduct discharge. How do you like that? Reportedly after his friend was killed during a drag racing incident in which Sulesky participated. He went absent without leave from the U.S. Army for 7 years. When asked about his military service by the PSR writer, okay, I don't know, Sulesky attempted to lie about it, claiming that he had been active duty from 2007 until 2016. His attempt to deceive the writer and this court reflects an alarming lack of candor on Selesky's part and suggests that he may not appreciate the gravity of the instant case. Further, in describing his appearance in Syria to the PSR writer, I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about, the PSR writer, but Selesky attempted to paint his time there as if it was a sanctioned U.S. mission. We just read that part. As Selesky told the FBI in his post-arrest interview, using his own money, he traveled by himself to Iraq in 2015, notably while still AWOL from the U.S. Army, by the way, and was then smuggled into Syria, where he joined a Syrian militia group to fight ISIS for, quote, a couple of months. However long he really feels like it. Because duty, honor, country. He claimed that this Syrian militia group provided volunteers, including himself, with a uniform and a weapon, and then assigned volunteers to different areas of work, including sabotage, RAR, EOD, probably also RAR, infantry, and sniper. And he was, KP and garbage patrol. Anyway, Selesky noted to FBI agents that he was supposed to go to a marksman unit, but did not have a sufficient mastery of the language. That's what they were looking for, the language, not the shooting. He did not elaborate further as to which unit he was assigned. Right, kitchen. Anyway, according to Selesky, during his time in Syria, a bullet grazed his right ear, and he began to rethink his decision to fight ISIS, so he made arrangements to come back to the U.S. Selesky reported that he suffered from PTSD as a result of what he saw in Syria, but that at the time of the arrest, he was coping well. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting to check in on these guys who say that they are, ready to lay down their lives for whatever their stupid cause is, which is usually the overthrow of the United States government as it happens. But, on the other hand, I might feel like leaving, or a bullet might graze my ear, or I might cut myself shaving and decide I don't want to fight ISIS or Antifa or anybody, and I'd just rather go home. I think it's important to know that that's the level of person you're dealing with. You should take them seriously because they can be motivated to do anything. At any given point, something stupid could happen, like January 6th, or flying yourself to Iraq and saying, I'll fight ISIS until you find out that fighting ISIS is dangerous, and you leave, but you have to put up with them in the meantime. So they're dangerous people. They're just not, the kind of dangerous people they like to pretend that they are. And it's important that you know that. All right, let's see. Other things ready to be discussed today, and there are several. Today's email that caught my eye was not the crazy PR people who want me to host their idiot guests on the show, but, there is one, in case we want to check in and see what kind of crazy is going on here today. But instead, my eye was caught by the Washington Post top politics news email, which arrives daily, and sometimes I open and sometimes I don't. But it was chock full of interesting headlines today, including one that I actually did put aside because I thought, hey, that's pretty interesting, from the Washington Post, because it was included. You had to figure it was going to be a story in the Washington Post, right? It was an email from the Washington Post trying to get you to click on their stuff. And I did. Trump's lawyer, which one? I don't know. We'll find out. There's 25 of them, and they're all up to something different today, by the way. This lawyer refused his request in February to say all documents returned. That's the headline writing. There's little articles and conjunctions missing and stuff like that. It's the headline style. But what they appear to be saying here, and we'll read the article and see if it holds up the headline here, that at some point earlier than Christina Bobb and which one of his crazy lawyers was it that was, I don't know. The name will probably come up in here, but Christina Bobb is the one that sticks in my head because she was the sucker that signed the thing. They handed over to the FBI a signed statement saying, yeah, all the materials have been turned over. And of course, all the materials had not been turned over. But further, it appears that they were asked to do something like that earlier in this process, way back in February. And one of the lawyers said, I'm not signing that crap. Are you kidding me? I'll end up in jail. And, wow, I'd like to find out more about that guy. The subheader says, after initial return of 15 boxes, remember that first round where, oh yeah, they found 15 boxes of documents that he shouldn't have taken. We didn't know that they were top secret things at that point. Attorney Alex Cannon. I don't think we know that one, but not Judge, what's her name? Is it, forget her first name, Cannon. Oh, rats. Well, at any rate, it's not Judge Cannon. And it's Attorney Cannon, Eileen Cannon. I was going to say Alicia, but I don't think that's it. Eileen Cannon. Not Judge Eileen Cannon, but Attorney Alex Cannon. Relation? I don't know. Probably none. Not the most common last name or anything, but, you know. Anyway, Alex Cannon thought there might be more records at Mar-a-Lago. People familiar with the matter said. Josh Dawsey and Jacqueline Almany are now, I guess, familiar with the matter. Familiar enough that they were willing to write and put their name on it in the Washington Post. Former President Donald Trump asked one of his lawyers to tell the National Archives and Records Administration in early 2022 that Trump had returned all materials requested by the agency. He hadn't. But the lawyer declined, because he's not crazy, I guess, because he was not sure the statement was true, according to people familiar with the matter. And I guess the reason you aren't hearing much about Donald Trump's lawyer, Alex Cannon, is he probably fired Alex Cannon shortly thereafter. But I don't know that that statement is true either, so I can't sign anything. I'm guessing that's why we're not hearing a lot about him. As it turned out, Alex Cannon was right. Thousands more government documents, including some highly classified secrets, remained at Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence and private club, where he runs around as a pervert. Thank you. The later discovery of those documents through a May grand jury subpoena and the August 8th FBI search of the Florida property are at the heart of a criminal investigation into the potential mishandling, it was real, of classified materials and the possible hiding, tampering, or destruction of government records. Alex Cannon, which is apparently a real name and everything, an attorney for Trump, had facilitated the January transfer of 15 boxes of presidential records from Mar-a-Lago Club to the National Archives after archives officials agitated for more than a year to get all original presidential records back, which they are required by law to do. Following months of stonewalling by Trump's representatives, archives officials threatened to get the Justice Department or Congress involved. Trump eventually eventually packed the boxes that were returned in January. How do you like that? People familiar with the matter said. I think that's a new development. I mean, up to now, he's kind of been denying that he had anything to do with the packing. He certainly denied that he had anything to do with the packing of the boxes from the White House. That's been their excuse of the whole time. Well, if there was anything mistakenly in there, it was because low-level coffee boys were doing the packing. So they've been denying that. But what's interesting, of course, is, well, I want to return the I don't want to return the documents, but I feel forced to return the documents. I'll pack the boxes myself, and I'll put the crap in it that I don't care quite as much about. And then I want one of the attorneys to say, that's it. There's no more. We certify it. Leave us alone. Of course, it was a lie. But you know, now it's like really, that's actually fairly serious and will show some, I think, demonstrate some serious criminal intent that he is said to have packed the boxes himself, which is not something he would ordinarily do with anything. He would delegate that for sure, but maybe somebody else handled things and he just supervised. But that's pretty interesting. Trump himself eventually agreed to comply with the rule of law and packed some of the boxes, but he didn't comply, of course. He agreed to give his version of compliance with the law, which is to say he personally decided to break the law some more and then lie about it. The former president seemed determined in February to declare that all materials sought by the archives had been handed over, said the people who, like others interviewed for this article, spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss internal conversations. Around the same time, the Washington Post reported that the archives had retrieved documents from Mar-a-Lago, the People said. Trump asked his team to release a statement he had dictated, because he's a dictator. The statement said Trump had returned, quote, everything the archives had requested. Trump asked Cannon to send a similar message to archives officials, the people said. In addition, the former president told his aides that the documents in the boxes were newspaper clippings and not relevant to the archives, two of those people said, and complained that the agency charged with tracking government records was being persnickety about securing the materials from his Florida perv club. I added a word in there. Do you know which one it was? Florida. Anyway, but Cannon, a former Trump Organization lawyer, there you have it, who worked for the campaign and for Trump after the presidency, but is a former now, told Trump he could not tell the archives all the requested material had been returned. He told others he was not sure if other documents were still at the club and would be uncomfortable making such a claim. The people familiar with the matter said. Other Trump advisors also encouraged Cannon not to make such a definitive statement. People familiar with the matter said. That is interesting, isn't it? Like, he actually had friends, apparently, who were looking out for him. Maybe just looking out for themselves, or they thought they would be asked somehow to sign something similar and they would be able to point to Cannon not signing it. Anyway, the February 7th statement Trump dictated was never released over concerns by some of his team that it was not accurate. Wow. People familiar with the matter said. A different statement issued 3 days later said Trump had given boxes of materials to the archives in a, quote, friendly manner. It did not say that all the materials were handed over. The papers were given easily and without conflict and on a very friendly basis. Oh, I guess this is his statement, so it is kind of dumb sounding. It did sound like his voice. So, the papers were given easily and without conflict, very strongly given, and on a very friendly basis, which is different from the accounts being drawn up by the fake news media, said the February 10th statement, which came on the same day that the Washington Post reported that classified material was found in the 15 boxes. So he screwed that up, too. That's amazing. A Trump spokesman did not respond to specific questions for this article, instead issuing a statement that said the Justice Department has no greater ally than the Bezos-subsidized Washington Post, which seems to only serve as the partisan microphone of leakers and liars buried deep within the bowels of the American government. But President Trump remains committed to defending the Constitution and the office of the presidency, ensuring the integrity of America for generations to come. I mean, it's dumb to even read their statements. And I have at times said, you don't even want to hear it. But occasionally it pays, I guess, an entertainment value to hear just how stupid, flowery, and how, out of their way they go to make it a grousing, complaining, conspiracy theory laden, as opposed to, hey, we dispute the reports. What can I tell you? They could just leave it at that. Anyway, yes, and then by way of disclosure, the reporters note parenthetically, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. I don't know if you knew that, but okay. Cannon did not respond to a detailed email seeking comment about his interactions with Trump and the archives. The question of whether Trump or anyone else knew that there was additional government material at Pervalago after the return of the 15 boxes has become a central issue in the Justice Department investigation. Yeah. Attempts to get Trump's representatives to falsely state that he had no presidential records in his possession could serve as evidence that he was intentionally and knowingly withholding documents, especially now that we know he packed the boxes himself. And if Trump continued, if we know that, but if it's true, we might know something false now. And if Trump continued to pressure aides to make false statements, even after learning the Justice Department was involved in retrieving the documents, authorities could see those efforts as an attempt to obstruct their investigation. And you know what happens when you obstruct the Department of Justice? This isn't obstruction of agriculture we're talking about here. This is obstruction of justice, like literally. Even as Trump was seeking to convey that he had complied fully with the request from the archives, Cannon appeared to have been communicating a different message to officials at the agency. On February 8th, according to people familiar with the matter, Archives lawyer Gary Stern told colleagues at the agency he had spoken with Cannon and that Cannon said he did not know if there were more relevant documents in Trump's possession. Stern had been asking the Trump team to attest that all relevant documents had been returned. Everybody was asking us to attest to that, so I attested to it. I thought I was helping. And he privately feared that they had not, those people said. Months earlier, in late 2021, when the archives was seeking the return of specific presidential documents, Cannon had told Stern that there could be more documents in Trump's possession than what he was transmitting to the agency, but that he did not know one way or the other. So it's a good way of trying to escape, anyway. Signals the reality, but doesn't, swear to anything that he knows not to be true. Cannon also told Stern that he was not sure where all the documents were located or what the documents were, according to people familiar with the conversations. According to an account given to Stern's colleagues, Stern also asked Trump lawyer Pat Philbin whether there were more documents. The people said Philbin declined through a spokesman to comment for this article. Whether he answered Stern or not, I'm not sure. By the way, one thing as I was thinking about when I was reading through this about Cannon, this part here, Cannon told Stern he was not sure where all the documents were or what all the documents were. That's an interesting question mark for me. That's a great answer for him to try to get out of legal trouble and to steer clear of legal trouble for the moment. But I do have my questions about whether he did, in fact, know what the documents were, or at least what the nature of the documents nature was. All right. Well, at any rate, I wonder whether he, in fact, knew what they were, but was trying to wash his hands of the whole thing and get out of there and thought, well, it's believable. It's not provable that I knew what the documents were, so I'm just going to say that, hey, I don't know, but my cover here is by saying I'm not going to sign this document. I look like a straight shooter, a guy on the up and up here. I'm not going to swear to that because that could be, that would be a lie. It could get me in legal trouble, complicate the whole thing, and you're not supposed to certify this sort of lie on behalf of your client, especially to a government agency or to anybody for that matter. But I think he might have thrown in there superfluously that he didn't know what the documents were, thinking, well, there's very few people who would be able to prove that I knew what even some of these documents were. Maybe I didn't know what all of them were. That's what I meant. And I'll plead that if they ever question me on it. But I don't know. This is just gut feeling. And I guess a thorough investigation would mean saying, okay, I have your statement that says you didn't know that, but I'm going to investigate whether that statement is true. You made a true statement about, or you what? I guess you didn't make a true statement, but you declined to make a false statement. So that's something in your favor, but it doesn't mean you're a big truth teller because you were a lawyer for Donald Trump for a while. So I have my questions. So yeah, I would parse every statement and check everything. All right, where were we with this? Philbin declined to comment for the article. Cannon's refusal to declare everything had been returned soured his relationship with Trump. Here we go. People familiar with the matter said, and people familiar with Trump guessed. Cannon, who had worked for the Trump Organization since 2015, was soon cut out of the documents-related discussions, some of the people said, as Trump relied on more pugilistic advisors. Interesting. A separate issue of concern to Cannon, although that's not he was fired or he left the Trump Organization. He might have had some other legal work that he worked on, but now he's listed earlier in the article as a former Trump lawyer. But it sounds like there might have been some intermediate step during which he worked on some other things before exiting. A separate issue of concern to Cannon and others was whether any of the material in the returned boxes might be classified. People familiar with the matter said Cannon did not have a security clearance and had not reviewed the boxes himself, one of the people said. Wink, wink. He had told other aides not to review the boxes either, saying that doing so could get them in trouble, these people said. Well, maybe. A total of 184 classified documents were found in the returned boxes, officials have said. Trump's team later returned 38 additional classified documents to the Justice Department in June in response to the May 11th grand jury subpoena, which sought any documents still at Mar-a-Lago that bore classified markings. In August, believing there was still more classified material at Mar-a-Lago and more perps, The FBI obtained a warrant to search the property and confiscated more than 27 additional boxes of material. Just constant lies from this guy. It's unbelievable. I mean, not to you and me, but to the people who aren't listening, it will be unbelievable if the news ever gets through to them. So they won't believe it. Agents retrieved 11 sets of classified material in their search, totaling about 100 documents. Some of them contained closely held secrets of the U.S. government. People familiar with the matter have said, including information about a foreign nation's nuclear capabilities. In responding to the May subpoena, other aides to Trump agreed to assert all documents being sought had been returned. So Evan Corcoran, that's the guy whose name I couldn't think of before, who replaced Cannon, told the Justice Department he was handing over all the relevant materials. People familiar with the matter have said. Christina Bobb, another Trump lawyer who now denies that she ever was a Trump lawyer, by the way, we'll get to that, signed a document. She's the dummy that signed it, saying that she had been advised that Trump's team had given over all relevant documents after a diligent search. The National Archives preserves all presidential records under the Presidential Records Act, which states that any records created or received by the president as part of his constitutional, statutory, or ceremonial duties are the property of the United States government and will be managed by NARA at the end of the administration. Oh, and by the way, some contributions to this report. I wonder why they put them at the bottom. I guess they do less than the people who got the byline. Rosalind Helderman, though, helped out, as did Carol Leonig on this as well, which, I don't know, I feel like it foreshadows a big story coming from Carol Leonig. And maybe Rosalind is helping her on it. They might be working on something separate and equally interesting. Somewhere in here, I think I put aside not only the Christina Bobb story, but was there another that I was thinking what was happening at the end here? Christina Bobb, I think, is, like I said, is now denying, I'm late with the music again, denying that she was, in fact, a Trump attorney, or maybe acting as a Trump attorney. We'll have to get to that after the break. Oh, yes, right. There was some other allegations out there about the nature of the records being returned. All right, I'll see if I can dig that one up as well. We're late for our break, or at least I'm late in the music, so here we go. Bye. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I know it sounds a little bit funny. It's because I exited and now re-entered at the wrong point in the music because I was late in starting it, but the break's over, so I guess we better get back to it. I was saying before the break that there was something else that I was reminded of, but that I haven't seen established by a traditional media outlet to this date. But yesterday, and now I don't see it anymore, so I don't know. We'll see whether it's, I don't know whether that means it's been removed or something, but it came via Der Wooder, who was passing on tweets from Mrs. Penstripon, however you say this name, but who are these two who I've mentioned, who are, very frequently on it before mainstream press really picks up on things, but also sometimes a little bit out ahead of things. And a lot of speculation, some of which pans out and some of which doesn't. But I was pretty sure I had seen mention of the possibility that among the records, among the papers seized by the FBI, were perhaps the president's January 6th call logs, things that were originally missing from the record, being sought by the January 6th committee in investigating, and that the president appeared to have 0 phone calls for the day, and there was no record of who he was communicating with, which was awfully unusual for this president in particular. And that maybe he decided to, in fact, those records were kept, but he, in fact, absconded from the White House with them. But I will say I cannot find that tweet now. So I don't know. It may be just that I'm trying to skim things while I'm working my way through the show. So I may have missed it, but or perhaps it was in a response rather than an original tweet, or also possible that it was withdrawn at some point. So I put that out there with a grain of salt. We'll see whether that emerges in mainstream reporting anytime in the near future. If it never resurfaces, I guess you know what to do with that story. But if it becomes, if it's established as true at some point, it will become relevant in the legal proceedings, and you'll hear more about it. And then you'll say, good. Well, now at least we know that wasn't total garbage. Or if it never comes up again, you'll be able to attribute it as such. Something, though, that was established by separate mainstream media reporting was the other lawyer story. And I have, I got the telling of it here from Igor Derish at, there's like a Y in there, DerYsh, at Salon. Trump attorney lawyers up, and everybody knows that's something that they're doing all the time, and a very clever saying around the internets and in real life is that MAGA stands for Make Attorneys Get Attorneys, or Making Attorneys Get Attorneys, and that's the end result. That's the most consistent result out of MAGA that I've seen for anything. Another Trump attorney has lawyered up and says she's willing to cooperate with DOJ in the Alago case, according to reports. And who's the Trump attorney who's lawyering up now? It's Christina Bobb. She, it says in the subheader, has already retained an attorney, and colleagues are urging Evan Corcoran to do the same. So that would be interesting. Trump will switch attorneys again midstream in this documents case, jettisoning Alex Cannon for Evan Corcoran, and then probably having to jettison Evan Corcoran as well for somebody else, someone even more pugilistic, expialidocious. Anyway, that's going to be interesting. And what was I thinking of with Alex? Oh yeah, I was just thinking about what it must be like to have been Gary Stern or some of the other lawyers handling things from the government and seeing, okay, well, Alex Cannon is the name of the guy we're communicating with respect to these documents. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of as this case heats up, Alex Cannon is like, yeah, it's not me anymore. Sorry, can't help you. Well, who is doing the case? Another guy, Evan Corcoran, whatever. That's obviously a signal to the DOJ. We're barking up the right tree here. There's no reason in the world why this guy would be leaving. He can't ethically tell us, the reason is, I think a bunch of crimes were happening, and here are the crimes. I mean, if we ask him about it, he has to tell us. He can't ethically withhold that, but he can't quite ethically volunteer it unless he had actually seen, he actually witnessed the crime happening. Then I think he's kind of under obligation to say, well, if I have suspicions about a client, I have to leave. I don't have to turn him in unless it's, I guess, a murder or something like that. But, yeah, he was making the most conspicuous exit, I guess he could, although I don't have any details about it. Maybe he was very quiet about it and he just simply stopped returning calls from Gary Stern. I'm just curious about what the exit looked like to Gary Stern. That's really my question here. I don't have any information on it. I should stop. Anyway, I do have information on Christina Bobb's exit, I guess. At least one member of former President Donald Trump's legal team has hired her own attorney. Many more have, but at least one means this is the one the story is about. And allies are urging another to follow suit, according to the Washington Post. Trump attorneys Christina Bobb and Evan Corcoran affirmed to the Justice Department that Trump had handed over all classified documents from his Mar-a-Lago club and residence in response to a May subpoena, but prosecutors say their response was incomplete after the FBI searched and found more documents at Mar-a-Lago and cited evidence of obstructive conduct in response to the subpoena. Bob has since hired her own lawyer, Florida-based former prosecutor John Lauro, and, quote, made it known to Trump allies that she is willing to cooperate and be interviewed by the Justice Department, according to the Post. And colleagues have similarly urged Corcoran to hire a criminal defense lawyer because of his response to the subpoena, according to the report, but he has insisted it's not necessary. Ooh, that's going to be smart. Asked if she was negotiating to sit for an interview with the DOJ, Bob told the outlet, "I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to talk about it." Bob signed a document affirming that Trump had handed over, quote, all documents that are responsive to the subpoena, unquote, after a, quote, diligent search. Corcoran then met with DOJ officials and made a similar statement. Investigators ultimately found more evidence that there were additional documents at Mar-a-Lago and secured a warrant to search the premises in August. Not even looking for pervs, which they would have found in plain sight, of course. You didn't need a warrant for that once you had the warrant for the other thing. Bob, a former OAN host who helped push Trump's legal challenges following the 2020 election, has insisted to Trump allies that she believes the document she signed was accurate, according to the Post. But now you can't possibly believe that anymore. But she also told the pro-Trump Right Side Broadcasting Network that she was not acting as Trump's attorney while serving as a custodian of records when responding to the subpoena, according to the report, meaning that the DOJ could compel her testimony more easily than if she were acting as Trump's lawyer at the time. Interesting. I think people were a little bit confused, Bob said. I am on President Trump's legal team. I do work for him on election issues. I was never on the legal team handling this case, just to be clear on that. It's possible. Which is why I came in as the custodian of records, because I wasn't on that team. Corcoran, who was referenced as Trump's attorney in court documents, has also been counseled, that's in quotes, by colleagues to lawyer up, according to the report. Trump hired Corcoran, who recently returned to practicing law in April, with no vetting after a single conference call while he was representing former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, who was convicted of contempt of Congress earlier this year. How you doing with Steve Bannon? Oh, I'm losing. Would you like to work for me? Sure. Christina Bobb and Evan Corcoran need their own criminal lawyer, as former DOJ Inspector General Michael Bromwich tweeted, citing their multiple misrepresentations to the DOJ. With his own attorneys facing potential legal jeopardy, Trump struggled to find an elite attorney willing to represent him in the case. Wait, I thought he was against elites. Ha ha ha, just kidding. Trump ultimately hired former Florida Solicitor General Chris Kise, who once represented a member of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro's administration, paying him a $3 million retainer from money donated to his super PAC. I see. That was a little bit confusing about whose money that is. Okay, so Trump paid. That's amazing. Is that what I'm reading here? Trump hired Kise, who once represented someone from the Maduro administration, and Trump hired Kise, paying him a $3 million retainer from money donated to his super PAC. So, I mean, it wasn't Trump's money that was used to pay him. I'm just amazed that a vendor working on Trump's behalf actually appears to have been paid. I mean, at this point, you would hope that anybody who's, worth, here's how you vet getting a lawyer. If you're Trump, if the person says, I need to be paid in advance, you go, that's a smart guy. He knows me very well. All right. He'll be a good lawyer. Versus, anything you want, Mr. Trump. Oh, do you want a retainer? No, I'm sure you're good for it. Like, okay, that guy is too dumb to be my lawyer. I mean, it's great for me. It's a great deal, but maybe I want to pass it up. Anyway, Kise has advised Trump to, quote, turn down the temperature with the DOJ and fought with advisors who urged a more aggressive approach. Isn't that interesting? I want to fire Alex Cannon. I need someone more pugilistic. Bring me, what was his name again? Evan Corcoran. Okay, Evan Corcoran has screwed up, and he needs a lawyer now, too. All right, I need a new lawyer, even more pugilistic. Okay, in comes Chris Kise. He's smart enough to be my lawyer. He knows he needs to retain her ahead of time. Okay, Mr. Smart Guy, what's your advice? Actually being less pugilistic. Exactly what I was saying. I was trying to be less pugilistic, but my advisors were telling me to be more pugilistic, very strongly pugilistic. So what could I do? I was trying to humor them. They're idiots, but you have to keep your people happy from time to time. I knew better. I knew where it was going. I'm very good at these things. People say I could have been a lawyer or a doctor or a rocket scientist or a rocket lawyer even, possibly, in case, if I were a rocket, I would be a very litigious rocket, is what I'm saying. Rocket, locket. I'm told you can say it either way. Anyway, Kise advised Trump to turn down the temperature, the exact opposite of Trump's original plan. Kise warned Trump's team that attacks were only likely to make the DOJ more aggressive and urged them to seek an off-ramp before a possible indictment, according to the report. He also argued that Trump's other lawyers, whom he said lacked experience with this type of case, they very well may have, had, quote, deepened Trump's problems and, quote, could face legal trouble themselves, unquote, according to the Post. I wonder why I'm not reading the Post on this. All right, well, at any rate, just weeks after joining Trump's legal team, CNN reported that he had already been sidelined. Though his name appeared in numerous court filings, he did not sign on to the Trump team's combative filing questioning the DOJ's motives last week. He didn't. The Post reported that Kise is now unlikely to play a public role in the Mar-a-Lago case, though he will continue to help Trump deal with his, quote, other legal problems. Trump spokesman Taylor Budowich did not respond to questions from the Post. While the media wants to, oh God, who cares what he says? Something, flag America, abortion. All right, so great. Anyway, that is interesting. So he's brought in, he advises them to turn down the temperature, and he's immediately like, yeah, maybe the best arrangement is for me to not be the public face of this thing. But I thought he did sign that thing. All right. Well, I thought that was very interesting. That's where we are with some of the 957,000 lawyers involved in this case. Okay, let's see. Other things that I have here in pocket for you. I'm trying to think, is there anything that we need to lay down here as a bed of information preparing the way for Joan's visit, if all is going well out in the West Coast today? And I don't know. I don't think so. But I think there's something I wanted to turn around and get to. Several people were begging for, they were begging me with tears streaming down their eyes, very strong, big, gigantic men, huge heroes of America and Syria, apparently, asking for this story to be considered. Thank you to all who suggested it. Where do we begin? All right, do I have it in, I'm pretty sure I actually have it in pocket already, but let's see if it's the same story same version of the story that everyone else is sending me. And gosh, there's so much. Yeah, here's the one from AL.com. We're going back to Alabama. Why would we be going back to Alabama? There's only one reason. Either a Forrest Gump sequel, that's not it, or more on the moron who is the chairman of the Alabama GOP party and his stupid photo ID and his dumb excuse for not showing photo ID. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a religious excuse. Not dumb at all. For not showing photo ID. I just had never run into that one before, except I imagined that we could one day run into it with the Amish vote. I don't know. Anyway, if they do, they go in horse-drawn carriages on their way. Is that interesting? Probably not. Anyway, Alabama GOP chairman made the photo ID that he used to vote. Remember we talked about that he had a credential of some kind that said regional press secretary for the office of the state auditor, and it had his picture and his name on it, and something that looked like maybe it was, I don't know, is that the Alabama state seal? I mean, it's seal-like, but I can't tell. If you zoom in, It might say it's the seal of the, of the state of Alabama. I don't know. And it doesn't look like it, like the state seal, Commonwealth seal, I guess here in Virginia, very elaborate drawing. There's usually some sort of drawing or figures that go along with it, or symbolism or chivalric symbols. And this is just a map of the state of Alabama, really. And it's just not very creative as seals go. And now that I'm looking at the thing, I mean, it's a very simple ID tag, and certainly, I mean, somebody made it anyway. I didn't realize he made it himself. That's the thing. But it's a simple deal, and it's made in an office somewhere, so it's not super official. I mean, so are driver's licenses, essentially, but there's only certain places licensed to make those. And, you can make a photo ID for the employees of your office or your business, right there on site. There's nothing official about it. So it's pretty simple in design. Didn't surprise me. But now that I look at it and I can see it has a barcode on the bottom, and the more I look, I guess the more I look at it, the more it looks like a fake barcode. I mean, I don't know. Usually the bars are more randomly distributed this way, the heavier bars, and this just looks like the same thing over and over again. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I can't read barcodes or anything like that. So, the point is, it is a fakey fake. Alabama, I'm reading the caption here. This is not it. But this is the caption on his picture of his ID. Alabama GOP Chairman John Wall produced a peculiar ID when voting in recent elections. As it turns out, he made it himself with the state auditor's blessing, which, okay. I mean, it's nice that he got that, but I don't know if that's going to get the state auditor in trouble. When you vote in Alabama, Kyle Whitmire writes for us. And remember, Kyle Whitmire wrote the last column we read about this. And it is a column. It's not straight news reporting. It's an opinion column, I guess. When you vote in Alabama, state law requires you to show photo ID at the polls. For most folks, this means a driver's license. But other forms of government-issued ID are permitted. I guess horse-drawn carriage license, if there is such a thing. Do you think there is one? Do you think it would be unusual to demand that the Amish get licensed for their thing? But they do have the reflective triangles on there. They got that out of them. Anyway, for most folks, this means a driver's license, but other forms of government-issued ID are permitted. A military ID, a passport, or a college student ID, among others, will do. And if you don't have any of those, the Alabama Secretary of State's office will help you get a special voter ID. The office will even make house calls for the non-ambulatory. That's pretty good. I mean, I don't know whether they're, they say they'll do that, but maybe they're not funded for it, or they just are like, no, I don't think so. Or you live in a black zip code, we can't get there, sorry. I don't know what they're doing. But on paper, the plan sounds pretty good. But the last few times Alabama Republican Chairman John Wall voted, he presented poll workers with an ID they'd never seen before. To someone who had never seen a state employee ID, it could be mistaken for one, but it wasn't. It bore a state seal. Now, I don't know whether, again, he doesn't really discuss whether it's the state seal, a state seal. It's there. Time for us to look this up. We love this kind of detail. State seal of Alabama, or Alabama, as I just typed. Alabama, there we are. Yeah, that appears to be it. It's interesting though. How they have that sometimes the outer ring around it, which will ordinarily say seal, Great Seal of the State of Alabama, and then maybe have the date at which Alabama was admitted to the Union or something. The official version that I see on the internets, which means it's real, just says Alabama up at the top and then Great Seal at the bottom. And his looks like it has, his imaginary version of that flowery language that you would think would be there, like Great Seal of the State of Alabama. What does it actually say? I don't know if I can, it's still kind of blurry. I don't know. I'm not really sure. Although it looks like it says, Great Seal of the State of Alabama, and then at the bottom it says State of Alabama again, which I think would be a dead giveaway as to its fakeness. But anyway, that's the state seal. It had that. It had a barcode. or what looked like a barcode, and Wall's picture. The badge said Wall was a media representative for State Auditor Jim Ziegler. But when I asked the Alabama Department of Finance, which administers employee IDs, that department said it had never issued him one, nor was Wall on the list of employees, past or present, in Ziegler's office. As it turns out, Wall made the ID, he says, with Ziegler's permission, which is also weird, and maybe we need to talk to him. And now the state's top election official, Secretary of State John Merrill, says that badge is not a valid voter ID. It does not meet the standard of any voter ID requirements listed under 17930, Merrill said, citing where Alabama's voter ID law appears in the state code. In another conversation, I told Wall that I had concerns that his ID did not pass muster under the law. That's a legitimate question, Wall said. That's a nice response. He's telling the truth. Wall's extended family has had trouble for years voting near their family farm in Limestone County in North Alabama. According to Wall, his family has a background in Anabaptism, and like Mennonites and the Amish, some of them have religious concerns about being photographed. But he doesn't because there's his photo on the ID. In a 2015 deposition, Wall's brother Joshua Wall said, when we heard about this, I think we read that bit from his last article, from the deposition, right? And he was involved in a trial at some point. Wall's brother Joshua said he and others in their family believe biometric identification, including photographs that could be used by facial recognition software, is the mark of the beast foretold in Revelation, which I'm told is properly done without in the singular, Revelation. This has caused trouble for the Walls at the polls. Beginning in 2014, poll workers have refused to let the Wall family vote with a conventional ballot. Good. The Walls have attempted to use an exception to the law that allows voters to cast a ballot if two poll workers sign an affidavit positively identifying them. Frequently, though, the poll workers at the Walls precinct have been reluctant to do so, and sometimes they have refused. Only 2 Wall family members have been able to vote consistently, state voting records show. John and his father, who uses an old photo ID from when he worked at the Redstone Arsenal. Why those don't contain the mark of the beast, even though they're biometric information, I have no idea. And in at least 2 recent elections, John Wall has used his unusual, i.e. fake, ID to vote. He has a fake ID. That's basically what it comes down to. When poll workers asked Alabama GOP Chairman John Wall for his voter ID, is this another caption? It is, yes. Okay, never mind. Then passing over that down to the rest of the article, Wall, who was the top GOP, that's funny, party official in the state, and I have now had a number of conversations, okay, it's oddly stated, but about his problems at the polls. In those, he has cast blame on poll workers and said, I've scared his family by writing about their problems at the polls. Eek. Not helping your family by writing about the problems at the polls so that you guys can get it all straightened out. He scared them. You're threatening my family. You're threatening me. I feel threatened. That means I get to shoot. Wow. Okay. By the way, don't forget that this whole thing started with Wall getting the last poll worker to refuse, getting that poll worker fired from their job. Volunteer job, but still. Anyway, in those conversations, Wall has been somewhat evasive about how he got the ID he used to vote. Last week, I asked Wall again who made the ID, and his answer was, it was a state auditor's ID. Yeah, see, not quite you mean, you're supposed to take from that, the state auditor's office made it. Okay, but who physically made the ID? Was it him? I did not make it myself, he said then. I asked him who had. He declined to say on the record, and I told him I wasn't interested in talking off the record anymore. This week, I spoke with Wall again. He called me after he learned that I had asked the Secretary of State's office about the ID's validity. This time, his answer evolved. According to Wall, he had done volunteer work for Ziegler after Ziegler was elected state auditor. Okay. When he assisted Ziegler with setting up email systems, a third-party provider asked him for credentials showing he was authorized to do so. That's when, he says, they made the ID. I mean, it could have been a letter from Ziegler saying, I hereby certify that John Wall is authorized on my behalf to do this work. And then it wouldn't have had the mark of the beast even at all. What an advantage, right? I took that to Jim Ziegler. He said, we talked about it, and at that point he authorized the creation of a press credential for my position as press secretary. I mean, that's all very interesting background. Who made the ID? From this point forward in the story, Wall uses the word we a lot. We used a printer to print the ID, he said. You used a printer to print the ID. I repeated back. We used a third party printer to print the ID. But you used it, right? I then asked him who he meant by we. Was it him and Ziegler? Yeah, he said. Anybody else, I would have asked? Ziegler's recollections about the ID have evolved too. As I first reported this story, I called Ziegler's cell several times to talk to him about it. I even went to his office in the state capitol once, but he wasn't there and neither was anyone else. The door was locked. You can just barge in though. You can just break it down because otherwise it's fraud if they don't let you in. That's what I heard. Anyway, after I left a message on the office voicemail, he finally called me back. He then said his recollection of the ID was vague. My recollection is before he was ever party chairman, I was doing one of my many investigations and he helped do it, Ziegler said last month. And I remember vaguely something about he needed some ID so that he could legitimately do this for me. That's all I remember. Ziegler later spoke to Wall about the ID, and after that, his recollection changed to mostly match Wall's. In an email to me this week, he said he had been confused earlier because we had a bad connection over the phone. And you know how that's happening all the time. Sometimes you get a space bug lands on the satellite that's connecting your call and bad connection. You know how it goes. I had asked John Wall to help the state auditor's office with news media work in a volunteer press secretary role, but that's not the story that he was telling before. The office does not have a staffer that does this. John agreed to assist us pro bono, and you get a free ID for it. Later, John Wall informed me that vendors who disseminate email news releases would require some type of press credential. He said that should be no problem to provide. That was the first and last I heard about the press credential, and the email releases were distributed. I tried to reach Ziegler again on his cell to ask him some follow-up questions. Did he help make it? Whose printer did they use? Has he made similar IDs for others? He did not return my call. All right, well, that's it. Oh, and by the way, included in here a picture of what a real Alabama employee ID would look like. Interesting. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. By the way, the real ID from the Alabama State Employees Office doesn't look all that different from what Wall put together here. Wall's is a little starker, a little more plain. They both use the seal. Of course, the real state ID uses the actual seal, and he uses this fake seal. I wonder he probably didn't create that. He must have gotten it off the internet somewhere. I wonder how he missed getting the one that I got. But anyway, there's also an alabama.gov, notation in here, but it's basically the same, a similar layout. It's not too far removed from what he put together. Anyway, what's that barcode? That's a good question. That's addressed here. Throughout all this, there has been one more thing about that ID that left me scratching my head. The ID has a barcode. State employees' IDs use microchips to interface with door locks in state office buildings. They do not have barcodes. Although this one, the one that they're displaying the real ID is redacted, and they've redacted a long, rectangle at the bottom where the barcode is on Wall's fake ID. And that's the shape of a barcode, so you would think that maybe there is one, but apparently they don't have barcodes. All right. In fact, the folks at the finance department pointed to this repeatedly as evidence that it was not a state ID. So what's the barcode for? And the real answer to that is I wanted to make it look like, IDs sometimes, or they used to have barcodes, or an old one that I was copying had a barcode. So I, copied and pasted a barcode from somewhere and put it on there to make a fake ID look real, which would, just solidify for all of us that, yeah, he knew he was faking an ID, but he will not want to admit that. So let's see how this comes out. What's the barcode for? In our last conversation, I asked Wall. At first, he suggested it might be his birth date. I told him I had decoded the barcode. So you can get a barcode reader that will read these things. And it did not appear to be his birth date. It was a sequence of numbers, mostly zeros, unlike anything on state employee ID badges. So now I am learning to read barcodes. Those same, that same pattern over and over and over again at the beginning, it does change toward the end, that's barcode for zero. And I don't know how to describe it, but you look at it and you would see that there's a certain pattern. Then the numbers change. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Did I read that right? 11 zeros in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, crap. Maybe it's 10. But that's a lot of zeros in a row. And then some different numbers. And if I knew the code, then I guess I could read a barcode. I guess it's possible anyway. So, all right. So it's a bunch of zeros, and it's unlike any employee ID number or anything like that. Oops, I lost my place because I went back to look at it. Let's see what's going on. Here we go. Right. So I told him I decoded the barcode. It did not appear to be his birth date. It was a sequence of numbers, mostly zeros, unlike anything on state employee ID badges. I'm not sure what it is, he said, adding that the ID did not give him special access to public buildings, privileged information, or government records. Yet that's not what I'm after here. I just want to know, did you fake it? But he had made it, I said. Didn't he know what the barcode was for? Was it just to make the ID look more authentic? It's a great question. And his answer, I believe that the barcode is associated with that ID. He said, I know, you put it on there. It is associated. But why? You made it, so tell me. Like, you decided what was going to be on there. You made this ID. He's trapped. He's trapped. I then asked him whether he was aware of any other IDs being made for other people or if this was the only one. Not that I know of, he said. And by the way, now that I think about it, wasn't making fake IDs for some reason or another part of what got Matt Gaetz's buddy, the state or the county auditor or treasurer or whatever the hell he was? I forget the guy's name. Wasn't that part of what he was busted for, making IDs? I mean, that may or may not have anything whatsoever to do with what's going on here, but I just thought that was, I don't know, it reminded me of that. Anyway, did he make any other IDs? Not that I know of, he says. Okay. Wall has taken issue with and cast blame at the poll workers at his voting place, but there is now a bright irony here that needs to be made clear. Public records show Wall pushed successfully in 2022 to have Clyde Martin, a retired electrical engineer, removed as a poll worker after Martin complained to higher-ups. But when Wall showed Martin that ID in 2020, Martin let him use it to vote. How do you like that? So he's used it before. In 2020, Clyde Martin said, okay, that's an ID. Go ahead and do it. And in 2022, I don't know. I guess he either became suspicious of the ID or maybe this time he didn't show it. I don't know. Wall has said that in 2020, he left his wallet behind and that ID was all he had on him. Most folks in that situation would have turned around and made a round trip home. Wall didn't have to because Martin gave him the benefit of the doubt. Like, that's wrong, but awfully nice of you, but wrong. In retrospect, maybe Martin shouldn't have. And when Wall went back to the polls this year, he used that ID again, this time very much on purpose. And it's the same poll worker. I bet he had no idea that it was the same poll worker. And the poll worker said, that's the one I didn't even read this part of the story, but I'm guessing he must have said, that's the ID you showed me. I recognize it. You told me you brought that when you forgot your wallet, but either you just pulled that one out of your wallet or would you forget your wallet again? How many times in a row are you going to forget your wallet for voting? I mean, this seems like the sort of thing you would never do again. But when Wall went back to the polls this year, he used that ID again, very much on purpose. The poll worker who replaced Martin, even different. Sarah Chadwell told me she wanted to take a picture of it and research it herself. Yikes. Instead, Limestone County probate judge Charles Woodruff approved Wall voting after Wall texted him a picture of the ID. I felt like I was being harassed, and that's why I made an issue out of it with the probate judge and why I used it again, Wall said. But that's not the one that got fired. But we now know that Chadwell was right to be skeptical of the badge. It's a legitimate question, as Wall says now, but it didn't have to be. Wall has told me he has a driver's license. All he had to do was show it. Just like you, just like me, just like his party has fought hard to require of voters in Alabama. And none of this would have happened. If you just complied with the law, none of this would ever happen. Stop resisting. That's really interesting. Okay. Well, that's the end of today's installment of this ongoing saga. It's amazing, of course, because what happened to the whole Anabaptist and I don't have pictures, but you do. You have a driver's license. And this ID has a picture on it. And you made the ID. And what's the barcode? I don't know. It's my birthday. It's probably not. It's a bunch of zeros. Isn't it really just to make it look more authentic? I don't know. This guy, what is he hiding? I mean, we know who he is. We know what role he serves in. He's got picture IDs, so that's not the issue. Why not show the driver's license? I am a little bit baffled by this. And I don't know. I mean, is he wearing like a swastika t-shirt and his driver's license? I'd love to find out what his answer is. But I mean, see how long it takes him to get him to answer questions about this. So now he's trapped. They got him. I see. It feels like dead to rights, but to what? On what? I'm not sure. But I definitely know whatever it is I know about this guy. It's a fascinating story. Doesn't have a great deal to do with, national politics, but it is interesting given that the Republicans are constantly pushing about the fake or the real ID thing, and everybody's got to have ID, and why it's so hard to show at the polls. You people are complaining about this, and there's no reason for it, and you can even get an alternate ID. We'll come to your house even. It's all on paper here in Alabama. So what's the big issue? And I don't know. What is the big issue? You're having the same problem. You tell me what the big issue is. No, I won't tell you. I find it interesting. So speaking of ironic and weird situations, there's also news reported both by the Daily Beast and the New York Post. I liked the headline on the New York or the Daily Beast thing. And should we read theirs rather than the New York Post? Because the New York Post sucks. The basic information, I'm sure, is still the same. Daily Beast put a great headline on it. Irony meter explodes. Why? As migrants lured to Florida for Hurricane Ian cleanup. Right. No one wants to do that job. Let's get some migrants to do it. And which migrants did they get? You'll never guess. Dan Ladden Hall has written this piece for Daily Beast. Migrants are reportedly being transported from New York City. Yes, New York City to Florida for work, supporting cleanup efforts in the wake of Hurricane Ian. They're not coming from Martha's Vineyard, true. Not coming from anywhere else in Massachusetts where they were transported to, so that they could actually get them some assistance and have some hope of work in the off season out there. But yes, weeks after the governor of Florida put migrants on a flight to Martha's Vineyard, they're all on their way back. Over the weekend, scores of Venezuelan immigrants. That's right. Maybe not the same ones, but Venezuelan immigrants nonetheless were boarding vans heading to the Sunshine State from a pickup point in Queens, despite having little information about who they would be working for, the New York Post says. Oh, so it's all coming from the Post anyway. I guess you're going to end up reading it anyhow. They want us for hurricane cleanup. We'd get paid $15 an hour, overtime, and $15 for food daily, I think. Javier Moreno, 37, told the paper, adding that a woman named Camila from an organization, that's all he knows, approached him with a flyer about the work. I'm going for the work, Moreno added. News of their journey south comes after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis controversially flew migrants illegally from Texas to Martha's Vineyard to protest the, quote, hypocrisy of the Biden administration's border policies. That's just a short blurb from them. If you want more, you got to read the New York Post, which is sad, but we might as well do it. Now, let's read their version of it, which is probably a little bit longer, give us a little bit more information. Although, what more do you really need to know? I mean, quite honestly, the thing that you really want to draw from this is, yes, if you bring migrants from Texas to Florida to Martha's Vineyard, they will in fact be helped and welcomed. There's no hypocrisy going on up there in that respect. And two, yes, migrants are coming here for work. And even if they're chiefly driven here for because of either political unrest or personal safety issues, and they are seeking political asylum, when they get here, they want to work because they want to earn money so that they can live. And yes, that's exactly what's going on. And if you offer, or if there's a chance to work, they'll even take a van on the off chance that maybe sort of kind of somebody involved in the enterprise is legitimate and will actually pay them. That's how interested they are in actually getting work and making it themselves and not having to depend on others for assistance, which, you know, is everything that the people who are arranging these flights said migrants weren't doing. And they're wrong. Scores of Venezuelan immigrants in New York City are hopping onto vans headed down to Florida for Hurricane Ian cleanup. According to the people that they interviewed, the same guy here is mentioned, Javier Moreno. Even just on scant details, he's going to jump in a van and go down there. A driver of one of the vans at the designated pickup site, a corner in Corona, told the Post on Saturday that he was headed to Florida. He said he was under contract with a water and debris company, I guess water and debris cleanup company. The firm did not answer its phone despite repeated attempts to call by the Post. That ain't great. I'm taking these people in the van straight to Florida tonight, the van driver said. I like it. I don't know how many of these people I don't know how many people have left or how many more vans are coming. No one knows. The migrants were leaving city shelters in droves to catch a ride and garner work down south. One migrant woman said she learned of the vans and the potential work from group chats that the migrants are in. We all decided we would go, she said. Asked who was offering the work, she said, I don't know anything, sweetheart. I like that. That's great. And by the way, where are all the folks? They're in shelters. And of course, New York City would have no experience whatsoever in dealing with migrants flooding in over our borders in need of assistance and help. Only the good offices of Ron DeSantis could make it possible for Northerners to learn about what it is to deal with immigrants. It's a good thing he went and did this. And by the way, more and more information emerging about like the firm that he used to hire the planes is GOP connected, and that Matt Gaetz apparently did some work for them in the past before he was in Congress. It's a whole tangled mess. But anyway, once again, pretty much everything that they're telling you about their program is upside down and backwards and wrong. Let's see. Another woman asked the Post reporter, do you know what kind of work we'll be doing there? Asking the Post reporter. The Post reporter has no idea. On Sunday, a slew of migrants had lined up as early as 8 a.m. at the spot at Junction Boulevard and 32nd Avenue to catch a bus to Florida, witnesses said. Some of them said they had been tipped to the opportunity by a woman named Camila. I wonder if Perla knows Camila. Gregorio Avila, 22, said he came from Venezuela and entered the U.S. through Texas before being bused to Gotham. So they're used to taking buses. You know, quite honestly, right? Well, you want to get on a bus and go to Florida? I don't know. Yeah, sure. I mean, aren't you a little bit suspicious? You think it's weird? I don't know, man. I crossed into the border, over the border into Texas from Mexico. They put me on a bus and took me to New York City. So the fact that there's free buses to Florida doesn't surprise or worry me at all. I survived the bus to New York. I'm going to get on this bus now. Texas officials have, and this is really, by the way, as we said, the irony meter explodes. Can I just say, as far as the irony meter goes, not only the irony of the migrants, Venezuelan migrants ending up back in Florida, but how about this? To get them from Texas to New York took state government intervention, state government money, some of which was, stolen out of federal funds. It was supposed to be used for something else, perhaps, but the government intervened and paid for these buses to take them from Texas to New York. Now, these migrants are going to go from New York to Florida. which, or all by itself, absent the DeSantis episode, isn't particularly ironic, but now it is because we've seen how he intervened. But who's paying? It's a private enterprise. The free market is free market has entered the chat and is ponying up private dollars to move people where the work is and where it's necessary. It's just interesting that small government and we ought not to be doing that. How dare you waste taxpayer money? They not only are they moving them, but they're flying them by charter jet, and where they bring them to vacation paradise. Not that they're going on vacation. In the meantime, the private market moves in much more efficiently, moving them by bus, although I guess these people were originally moved by bus, which I guess that's just as efficient. But paid for privately, that's more efficient from the government perspective. It is interesting that only through government intervention, big socialisms, can Texas get what it wants done. But the private market intervenes and says, you're actually quite stupid. We're moving them to where the work is in Florida. Interesting. Texas officials have been sending thousands of migrants who illegally cross the border, but that's wrong because it's the New York Post. Well, they may also be sending people who illegally cross the border. But of course, if that's the case, if they're sending people who illegally cross the border, then the Texas program is illegal in itself because they move them in between the states after that. That's a violation of federal law. But if they are asylum seekers, they are there legally, and they should note that, and they didn't illegally cross the border before seeking asylum. No. Anyway, they've been moving them to Democratic cities, such as New York, in protest over what they call President Biden's dangerously lax immigration policies. Anyway, it doesn't work. They end up back in Florida, and that's that. Avila said a lady here had offered him and others work in Tampa. They're telling us that we are going to work, Avila said. We have a contact with a lady who is taking us to Florida. We're going to work as contractors on the disaster. A Venezuelan asylum seeker said about 100 people had left the 30th Street men's shelter in Manhattan to take advantage of the work offer. I came back to the shelter one night to find that people were leaving in vans, the 38-year-old man said. I don't know how they found out about it, but when I got back, like 100 of them had left. I didn't want to go because there were too many questions about the offer, he said. Corona resident Joseph Venuto, 55, said he'd seen about 30 people leave from the corner in recent days and that he'd assumed the Federal Emergency Management Agency was behind the effort. A rep for FEMA told the Post on Sunday that the agency was not involved. A spokesperson for Mayor Eric Adams said City Hall was not involved in the transport of any migrants. Florida officials did not return requests for comment. Another migrant said he wasn't aware of the offer, but that he'd definitely like to get in on it because it's difficult to get papers to work here. You're not getting any papers in Florida either, probably, but you might be getting paid. That's the paper you're interested in. One nearby resident, a nurse named Jennifer, who declined to give her last name, brought the migrants clothes and bought them Domino's pizza on Sunday evening to eat as they waited anxiously for their ride. The migrants, most of whom traveled with their stuff in grocery bags and backpacks, eagerly bundled up with the clothes from the back of Jennifer's black Honda Civic. I'm a nurse, so it just broke my heart looking at them, said Jennifer, 36. I saw them, and they're hungry, and they've been here the entire day. Nice person, Jennifer. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it, and Florida appreciates it as well. So, they're going to get workers to help clean up their disaster, and then they'll be angry that they're there again shortly thereafter. All right, let's see. Other things that we might be able to fit into this segment that make a lot of sense. Well, none of it makes any sense, really. Yes. I guess we might as well make it as full a Pervalago day as possible. I did note that more from Maggie Haberman's reporting, both for the New York Times and for her paper. CNN has a story on this, but I had seen it circulated on Twitter. There was audio released as part of her interviews with Trump, I guess in preparation for the book, were released. And, well, here's how CNN reports it. New book audio. Trump falsely claimed he gave Kim letters to archives in 2021. Jeremy Herb is writing it up for CNN. But again, it's based on an appearance on CNN by Haberman, who's talking about the book. And this bit of audio. Former President Donald Trump falsely claimed he had given the letters he exchanged with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the National Archives last year when he was interviewed by New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman for her forthcoming book, according to the audio of the interview obtained by CNN. That is to say, she brought it with her and gave it to them, like obtained by. They broke into the office Mission Impossible style and stole the knock list. Trump also claimed in his interviews with Haberman that he was not watching television while the January 6, 2021 riots at the U.S. Capitol unfolded. No one believes that one, but that's what he's saying, which has been contradicted by testimony of White House aides to the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. Haberman's book, blah, 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 go buy it or whatever. Confidence Man, being released Tuesday. That's today. Congratulations, everybody. The book, which includes new details about Trump's time in the White House, chronicles how the former president's rise in the world of New York City politics and real estate in the 70s and 80s ultimately shaped his worldview and his presidency. It made him a crook, and he stayed one. Haberman told the New York Times, which first reported the audio clips, that she asked Trump in a September 2021 interview, on a lark, whether he had taken any memento documents from the White House. This is the germ of her he just loves tchotchkes guess. Like originally, before anybody broke the story. And so, you got to give her credit for this. She does say, well, I know what Trump is like and the tchotchke collector that he is. So my working theory is maybe he took a couple of things, and he's stupid, and he might say, yeah, I took a couple of things because he loves to brag. And in fact, that is breaking news. Although I don't know what she does with the information. Does she tell the National Archives and Records Administration and that starts the investigation? Or did they find out on their own? I don't know. That's an interesting question, too. Might want to pursue that one. So, on a lark, she says, did you take anything? Trump told Haberman, nothing of great urgency, no, except for the nuclear secrets. It's an interesting response to that question. Before bringing up the Kim letters unprompted. And Haberman does a great job in the segment on CNN, sort of explaining that, I knew that he really loves tchotchkes, is basically what she's getting at. She doesn't, I don't think, use the tchotchke word again, but so I know that's what he's like. And then I asked him about it, and he seemed to, register that he was being asked, did you do something that you should know is illegal? And it evidences some understanding of the situation, which he then blows off at some point anyway. I mean, at the point when he's moving out of the White House. But it indicates that he knows that what he's done is wrong by saying, no, I didn't take anything of great importance. So he's covering up there. But his impulse to brag is just too great. And Haberman points that out. And he then sort of switches his story. Well, yes, I did take something. But then again, maybe not. So he switches his story a couple of times. Right. Nothing of great urgency, no. Before bringing up the Kim letters unprompted. I have great things, though. He's got to brag. The letters, the Kim Jong-un letters, I had many of them, Trump said. You were able to take those with you? Haberman asked. Like, he's got to brag. But his intent is, in the end, to say, no, I didn't break the law. No. No, I think that's in the archives. But most of it is in the archives. By the way, they were not in the archives. So he basically blurts out that he's got them, and then maybe realizes what he's done, or I don't know, and then just says, no, I don't have those anyway, but I have great things. I have very great things. The things that I have are great, very strongly great. He's got to do this, right? And then he says, no, I think they're in the archives, but they're not. The Kim Jong-un letters, sorry, this is still him. No, I think that's in the archives, but most of it is in the archives. But the Kim Jong-un letters, we have incredible things. I have incredible letters with other leaders. You have those? No, I also don't have those because it would be illegal. I can't. Oh, actually, I do have them. Oh, well. CNN and other outlets have previously reported that Trump, in fact, had kept the Kim letters. So he knows he needs to say he doesn't have them, because if he says he has them, that's evidence of a crime. But he also knows I have committed that crime, so I have to say that I didn't. And a maybe smarter thing would be to avoid mentioning the Kim letters altogether, so that there was no evidence of knowledge of guilt. But he's a very dumb guy and he has brainworms, and so he does this. So how do you like that? CNN and other outlets had previously reported that Trump, in fact, had kept the Kim letters among the tens of thousands of government documents that he took to his Mar-a-Lago resort after leaving the White House. The letters were among the items in the boxes he turned over to the National Archives in January, which also included classified material that prompted the archives to refer the matter to the Justice Department. In another audio clip of her interview with Trump, Haberman asked how Trump found out that rioters had breached the Capitol. The former president claimed, I'll tell you how it didn't happen, watching television. That definitely didn't happen. I had heard afterwards, I guess he actually says it, so we'll give him the voice in this one. I had actually heard afterwards, and actually on the late side, I didn't know until late. On the late side, I was having meetings. I was also with then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and others. I was not watching television. I didn't have the television on, he said. I was not crunching all the Doritos I wanted. I did not believe they would make more. This is all a lie. It wasn't Cheetos either. Trump continued, I didn't usually have the television on. I'd have it on if there was something. I then later turned it on and I saw what was happening. So he was totally unaware of everything because he's an idiot and not a good commander-in-chief.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen versus Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter has joined us for the regular Tuesday segment, so welcome back. And let's see, I think we're pretty much, I think we can basically say we got the gist of what went on yesterday with the latest Maggie Haberman book excerpt thing, and I think we can all be less mad about this particular excerpt because I guess she was interviewing him after he was president. She didn't hold on to this information for a very long time anyway, and he was already not president by that point. But it is interesting that in September of 2021, she, has a hunch about how dumb he is, basically, and asks, did you commit any crimes with respect to the presidential records? And he says, no, yes, no. But not big ones, but also no. Yes, I did. But I had very great opportunity to commit terrific crimes. I didn't, except...
But I could have.
I want you to know that I could have, and specifically with these documents, which I deny having taken, but ended up being the ones that he had taken. So, I mean, he's not a smart guy. He's just not. But I wonder now, I mean, I'm sure that the NARA people have reason, like, the letters from Kim were very famous, and you might very well have said, as an archivist, I'd be very interested in seeing those things. I can't wait to find them. I'd like to, catalog them and display them or something. And they never show up, and you say, they're missing. We're going to have to track those down. I assume Trump still has them, but how early did they know that? But it wasn't from hearing it from Maggie Haberman in September that Trump had just basically said, I probably did a crime with this specific piece of paper. But she waited, I guess, not only for the book, but to release the audio. Maybe that's not so great, but I don't think she went to the National Archives and Records Administration and said, I have this tape of him saying I did a crime, but who knows? So we'll find out.
I'm not going to stop being mad at Maggie Haberman for anything. So.
Well, no. I mean, it's a complicated picture, and I mean, there were definitely things that she, should have told us. And in some ways, I mean, she released plenty of information at the time. I mean, all of her writing, we all say, why didn't we know more about this? But we knew what we knew because of largely what she was reporting then. But still, yeah, there are more things. Then there's also the complication of, well, it's not entirely clear when she found some of these things out. She interviews him after he's president and finds out dumb stuff. Okay, you couldn't have told us then because he didn't know yet. But then now I find out you knew in September of 2021, and it isn't until January of 2022 that Nara says, hey,
And we can't just blame her because, all of the huge number of books about the Trump administration that have come out, all of these reporters held on to stuff.
Yes. So it's not just her. That's definitely, that's pretty clear. I mean, we've been mad about this for a lot of people because they're all doing this.
For a really long time.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep going back to 2005 when the New York Times published the Lichtblau Reisen blockbuster about warrantless wiretapping by the Bush administration.
Yeah.
That they knew about and wanted to publish in the fall of 2004 before the election, and the Times spiked the story.
That would affect the outcome of the election. If you tell people about the crimes of the current president, they won't vote for him, and that will impact the election. It's supposed to be about who you want to have a beer with.
On the election,
yeah. That's always been fascinating to me, that you would come to the conclusion that, well, it would unfairly impact the election for people to have the truth about the candidates. Like, that's crazy. It's not supposed to be about, well, I'd like to have a beer with this one, but I wouldn't if he was a criminal. Well, then why don't we just decide on the beer, and then we'll tell you what kind of guy you were drinking with. After that, like, okay, super reporting. But it is interesting, and it's weird that the odd model that they have here. And I don't know, if you want to blame yourself for it, you can figure out a way. It's the time of year. The Jewish folks are blaming themselves for everything at this particular point in time. Just sort of thinking about, why can't, I don't know what they pay Maggie Haberman at the Times, but it is a top job in journalism. I assume it's pretty good, but not super great, necessarily millions of dollars or anything like that. So they make their money in the books. And so if you want to blame yourself, well, not enough people are paying for subscriptions to the Times so they can pay them to spill the scoops right then and there. They have to, basically, this is like Substack for journalists who are also, by the way, also having to flood to Substack. They don't make enough money, I guess, at the jobs, or the jobs aren't stable enough, or who knows what, and they save it up and sell it in a book. And if they can't make it a book out of it, they go to Substack and get it $10 at a time. I don't know. I don't really feel like it's my fault for not paying for the news, but I pay. New York Times, I do pay. So I don't know. Everybody else doesn't. Armando says I shouldn't, and he may be right. But plenty of people seem to pay. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Journalism has problems structurally. I don't know how to solve them. They may have a point that the really juicy stuff people are paying for in books. And if you guys can figure out a way to restructure that, we'll tell you sooner. I don't know. Is there a market reason?
I would like to return to the basic idea of the function of journalism, particularly daily newspapers, of providing the news every day.
Yes.
The news that is most important. For the functioning of our society.
It would be good if that was the major motivation. And the fact that I get paid is really about, well, I need to eat while I do it. So can I have some food? Yes, sure. Can I have a house in the Hamptons? No. that's, I'm sorry, but but they may say, well, this news should be worth that. And we do have societal problems. We want to, or we don't want, but it ends up being the case. You can have the house in the Hamptons if you make a movie about a superhero, but if you tell us the actual news, ramen noodles in an apartment, maybe we have that backwards.
Yes, that is messed up, but
it's, I don't know, somehow not my fault, but it partly is because everything's my fault today. Anyway,
it's that time of year.
Yes. Well, tomorrow I'll be.
I could absolve you. I would absolve you, but
I can handle that myself. We'll do that by not having food and thinking about it very hard for a day, and then we blow a horn and it's over. It's the abbreviated version of it. There's scripture. Don't worry about it. It's an important thing.
Happy New Year.
Yes, right. Thank you. And now this is another thing I'll have to be dealing with tomorrow. I'm sorry I said that. It's not true. I don't believe it that way. Okay. Aside from myself, I have a question for you today that we've lined up ahead of time. One of our most consistent and participatory listeners, Gil, has got a question that he wanted to put to you. Thanks. Let him know that he's listening now, I guess, or maybe I'll take the answer off the air. I don't know how it is. But the question is, if we manage to, me personally, go out there with you, knocking on doors, if Democrats keep the House and even expand their numbers in the Senate, how likely would it be to follow up these victories with an expansion of, say, the Supreme Court? This is expanding the courts, and it could be many courts. They could expand all the courts, all the federal courts, if they want to. And it doesn't require any kind of constitutional amendment. It would simply require legislation. Any indication that things would change after a midterm election, or would it take re-election of Joe Biden to do it? What do you think? Have you got any ideas on that?
I think it's likelier now than it was a year ago.
Okay, yeah.
But it really does take keeping the House, and it does take expanding the Senate majority.
Yeah, well, you definitely have to have both.
Sinema and Manchin have made it absolutely crystal clear that absolutely nothing will keep them from protecting the filibuster. So we got to get rid of the filibuster. Kind of a big deal.
I guess so, yeah. As I mentioned, okay, so Republicans would likely filibuster any expansion of the courts because it would put them at a disadvantage, and you wouldn't be able to rely on Manchin and Sinema to do it. But he does say specifically if we were to expand our numbers in the Senate by 2. So it seems like what he means is he's thinking about those two. Can we overcome
all things being equal?
Yeah.
Is it going to happen? Again, it's likelier now than it was a year ago. Mostly because of overturning Roe. I mean, just the egregiousness of what the Supreme Court did.
Yeah, okay, I see.
And the backlash to it, and you're even seeing now in the New York Times editorial boards and places like this with, the session starting this week and seeing all of the things they've lined up to destroy this time around.
Yeah.
You're even seeing a shift in public perception, certainly. The Supreme Court has lost legitimacy with the public. I mean, that's just it. And John Roberts might say that that's unfair. He might think that that's a horrible thing, that it's just absolutely unfair for the people to say the court's not legitimate because they're acting as another arm of the Republican Party. But that's what people think. That's what people see. And you're seeing that increasingly in the commentary in newspapers. It's sort of the scales have fallen from our eyes about what the Supreme Court truly is.
Okay, yeah, well, it's certainly more widespread. More people are saying it, or as Donald Trump used to say, or John Barron for that matter. Many people are saying this.
Many
and they are.
Saying.
And this time they're printing it, and you can see for real who's saying it. There's real names attached to it. Although sometimes they just say the editorial board. but it's definitely spreading as a sentiment. And I mean, fair or not,
is it going to come down to how much of an institutionalist is Joe Biden in large part, and for that part, a lot of the Senate. I think you're going to have to convince Dick Durbin.
Yeah, probably.
And I don't know that you can do that.
Yeah, I don't know what their attachment is to 9, but
it all comes down to we have to fight to expand the Senate majority, and then we have to fight like hell to convince them that this is something that needs to happen. And the Supreme Court's going to help. There's no sense at all that all of this is going to keep Alito, Thomas, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett from doing the worst, particularly Alito. If anything,
Yes,
he's
you're
more
right,
bloodthirsty to go after, to own the libs, essentially, which is what he's been doing. And I think that this is probably driving him even further on his agenda. Could be. Of the backlash. So they are not going to temper any of their decisions because of the reaction to Dobbs.
Yeah. I think, well, you make a good point here, which is, I guess we could take away from this, your role in this as an activist remains the same. You should be pushing for the expansion of the court and, preparing for uncomfortable moments with your senators and representatives as a result. That's the role they're going to play. The role you need to play is to push for it. And if you push for it and the Supreme Court, in a backhanded way, as you mentioned, helps you by continuing to issue outlandish rulings that make it more and more obvious as time goes on that this is a real crisis, and that, the expansion is a legitimate solution to it. Maybe we win over votes. To the extent that if you were somehow magically to convince the conservatives on the court, hey, like in the 1930s with the last effort at expanding the court, saying, well, maybe what we ought to do is pull back a little bit and curtail our rightward surge in order to turn down the temperature on expansion of the court. Well, then that would be a victory too. So It's win-win in that sense. I mean, you are either going to eventually have more Democratic lawmakers wake up and realize that this needs to be done, or be replaced by people who do realize that, I suppose, over the years, or you'll convince the Supreme Court to hide out and be conservatives in exile again, which would also be great.
The other thing to think about is that it's not just court expansion that has to happen. It's not the only way it's not the only bite in this apple.
Okay.
Reform has to happen. The Supreme Court has got to adhere to the judicial code of ethics that every other federal judge has to. That has to happen. But also, Congress can get a little bit more aggressive in asserting the fact that, yes, there are 3 co-equal branches, and it's one of them, and it can write into legislation, this is not under the Supreme Court's purview. We are putting this down in the law. This is the law. This is not something that the Supreme Court gets to say yes or no on.
Yes, you can limit
They can actually do that. Congress
That's
gets
true.
to do that. And they need to do it more.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, I guess people have come to imagine over the years, well, the Supreme Court has jurisdiction over everything because they're supreme. But in fact, it can be curtailed. And it was pretty narrow to begin with. I mean, it's only supposed to be appellate jurisdiction. They don't take original jurisdiction over anything but suits between states. I'm sorry I went down that road, but it is true. It's in there, one weedy thing. But but you can, in fact, limit their jurisdiction and say, sure, you can take appeals, but not on this subject or about this law. You can actually pick and choose and pass it. And again, that too requires no constitutional amendment, just straight legislation will do it. And
from here on out, that's what they need to be doing.
Yeah.
But the problem is there's all of this that is still in their purview, and, much of it is going to be destroyed this session, probably. Clean Water Act was up yesterday. And
already.
Yeah, already they've tackled the Clean Water Act. We've got affirmative action and 40 years of precedent on affirmative action of the court saying, yes, this is something that higher education can consider in admissions. Yes, this is the way society advances. That's up. Even Native American adoption in 1979, I think it was, the Supreme Court said, yes, we should make sure that Native American children are adopted by people within their culture, by Native Americans, and we should prioritize that. That's probably going away. And then there's all of the election stuff.
Yeah.
What's left of the Voting Rights Act on redistricting, and that's being argued today. In fact, the Alabama case is being argued today.
Okay.
It was a redistricting gerrymandering case where the part of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, that says you can't dilute the minority vote by, putting them all in one district, which is what Alabama did.
Yeah, all right.
You can't do that. That's what's on tap for today in the Supreme Court. And we've seen where they go on voting rights, so we know where they're going to go with this one. There's pretty much going to be nothing left of that law, which needed to be reauthorized, which John Roberts, back when they did the Shelby County versus Holder.
Oh, yes.
Which was Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
Oh,
when they
let's
get
say
it.
Yes.
Roberts basically said, well, Congress, go fix it. Here's the things that we would accept if you put in the law. And of course, because of Republicans and because of tight Democratic majorities and or Republican majorities, Congress didn't do it. So that's something else Congress needs to do aggressively.
All right. Yeah, plenty of work to be doing.
Rights Act, something that Joe Manchin also would not help Democrats do by breaking the filibuster. So
plenty of work ahead, but you're right.
Ahead, but yes,
they can be done.
Court expansion has to be the ultimate end goal here, even if Congress does all of this stuff, because of the harm they can still create.
Yeah.
Because everything Congress can pass can somehow or another be challenged, probably in the Fifth Circuit in Texas. We saw another one happen last week, rise up to the Supreme Court, and there's the end of it.
Well, yeah, so lots of things that ought to be on the agenda, but so that will be one of them, and it certainly has to be on the activist agenda, the expansion. But you have a wider arsenal than just expansion to be working with, and maybe you can get some concessions out of a Democratic majority on some. I'm sure it'll be incremental. It won't be one comprehensive package that answers all questions. And there may be people you can't get on expansion, but you can get on judicial ethics being applicable.
That's the lowest hanging fruit.
You'd think.
That one should, particularly after Ginny Thomas and Clarence Thomas,
yes,
that one should be a no-brainer for anybody, any Democrat.
I would think so, and I think it resonates with a lot of people, even with the Republicans. It ought to resonate, just the idea that there's one branch that can just say, I'm not going to fill out those forms. Although now we have two branches that don't.
Right.
But those were some astonishing stories just the last couple of days of the spousal income on the Supreme Court being, well, in the Thomas's case, just left off entirely. I mean, $700,000 left off.
That
was
back in 2011 that story
That's
broke, and it came back up because.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Well, because of Ginny Thomas largely, and all of this, people started remembering and then started looking in more. And this was actually the one thing I can give Politico credit on, which I don't often do because it's generally really, really bad. They dug into this and looked at Amy Coney Barrett's husband's income and Jane Roberts' income. And clearly, Barrett's husband relocated his South Bend, Indiana boutique law firm, just a little one, opened
Right.
up an office in D.C. a year after she was seated. And, clearly they are making coin off the fact that they are married to somebody on the Supreme Court.
Yes, they say as much when
Yeah.
they deal with them.
And Barrett and Roberts are very careful in not disclosing this, particularly Barrett. She didn't even list in her disclosure form, she didn't even put down the name of her husband's firm.
It's just in a law firm somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly, they feel like none of the rules apply to them. That $700,000 thing really struck me. So that's actually old, but that is a remarkable number to leave off of any disclosure form, particularly when Clarence Thomas makes $200 and something thousand.
Well, and you can't look at it and not see the connection between Ginny Thomas gearing up to fight the Affordable Care Act, have it declared unconstitutional. She set up where she was getting some of the money was this nonprofit, a 501c4 dark money group she set up.
Yeah.
Liberty something. There's liberty in the names of all of these.
Right. Because of all the liberty that's happening.
To try to get the Tea Party kind of geared up to fight the Affordable Care Act. And this is where all of that income was generated. It was in the years when it was coming before the courts. And in fact, that organization she started disbanded in 2012 when
after they paid her all the money
was decided in the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it was pretty obvious what was going on here.
No more opportunity to influence the court. So here's all the money that's left. See you later.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Then she turned her attention a few years later to let's raise money to overturn, and rather than the Affordable Care Act, overturn the election itself. And who knows what she's collecting from that.
She didn't discuss any of that with her husband.
No, because they're very busy and they live separate lives. They're best friends who talk about the weather, I guess.
Yes.
All right. Well, no surprises there, but it was interesting to learn about all the other spouses and what they're up to. And that's something they would eventually have to live up to. They don't have to disclose things. There's just because there's no appeal from the Supreme Court. They just rule that, this is how we're going to follow it. There's no higher authority you can bring it to. I guess, though, you can attempt to bring legislation forward that would require more, although I would be interested to know whether they think, well, that's unconstitutional. It's a conflict of putting one branch in control of another. We don't have to listen to you. That would be an interesting claim.
It would be. I would like to see an aggressive Congress push that just to see what happens.
It would be interesting to see. And then we would know whether they were, in fact, in need of further reminders that there's supposed to be a balance between the branches, and you'd have to come up with new ones. But it would be an interesting addition to the legitimacy question. I don't know. This one branch seems to think that in asserting its independence, it can be completely lawless and bound by nothing. That does seem weird for the rule of law people to refuse the rule of law.
That is, deciding constitutionality of things. Yes.
Okay, but we should make that clear. All right. Well,
and just in light of that, we should say that it has now been 100 days since Roe v. Wade was made history.
Yes.
Since Dobbs came into effect, there are the White House is marking it with another cabinet meeting and saying what they can do, and probably court expansion is not on that list. But what we've seen thus far is there are now bans that criminalize the procedure in 13 states. So total abortion bans, criminal bans in 13 states. Georgia puts the procedure at 6 weeks, so it's close enough. Clinics have been closing everywhere. 43 clinics in 11 states have stopped performing abortions. Other states are completely overwhelmed. And this is something that's bad. It's creating delays of up to like 3 weeks.
Oh.
Illinois has had such an influx of patients because of the bans surrounding them that it's pushed back abortion care 3 weeks, which changes everything about how medically it can go forward for many people.
That's and time is of the
other
essence.
People's
in
medical
many cases.
emergencies are not being addressed. You saw a story about a young girl, I think another one in Ohio this week, who has rheumatoid arthritis and has not been able to get the drugs she needs to treat rheumatoid arthritis because they can also be used to cause an abortion. So all of the horror stories, all of the things that all of the advocates for abortion care briefed the Supreme Court on before they made the decision have come to pass. All of the horror stories we knew were going to happen are happening right now.
They tend not to believe those. I don't know, when they're argued to them. Oh, no. That's an
Just
exaggeration.
Like all of the pundits told us, oh, you're being an alarmist. There's no way the Supreme Court's going to get rid of Roe v. Wade.
Right.
There's no way.
Well, they came from a tradition where precedent mattered, and they forgot that they were operating with people who don't believe in that precedent.
Yes.
And they didn't know yet. Now
when we tell you, yes, gay marriage is on the chopping block, believe us. When we say contraception is in danger, yes, believe us.
Well, I wonder if that helps increase the chances at all for court expansion. If everybody, certainly all the members of the House and 1/3 of the Senate will be returning after having campaigned on the theme of, oh, hey, all those people were actually right after all, and now I believe them too. It'd be interesting to see whether they shift back to, but I'm not going to do anything about it mode.
Well, yeah, part of that's going to depend on us again. We've got to push.
All right. Well, we keep up the pressure, and in the meantime, interesting about the backlog in other states in Illinois. Can Illinois bring Venezuelan abortion doctors in by plane, by any chance?
That's something that the White House can do. The White House has the power to say, providers can go state to state to help.
Oh, so for a real thing. Okay.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
All right. Well, that we'll keep in mind as well. Thanks for enlightening us on these things and for joining us again. Hope to speak to you again next Tuesday. Thanks, Joan. Take care.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time now to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for the day. Let's see what's on the menu here. A California high school football team forfeited the rest of the season after players staged, a slave auction with 3 black students in their underwear. Why do these things still happen? Stay tuned.